Gurave Gaura Chanjaya Radhikaya Tarale Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tad Bhaktaya Namo Namaha Vanchakalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubheva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Vandanavat Pranam devotees, Madhavatiti Ekadasi Ki Jai. For those who, it is the Ekadasi Titi today. Also, before I do anything, I want to pray sincerely with very thankful heart to the lotus feet of my Guru Padma, Nittalila Pravishtam Vishnupada Paramahansastu Tarasata Sisamat, Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj, and equally unto the lotus feet of my Param Gurudev, Nittalila Pravishtam Vishnupada Paramahansa, Astu Tarasata Sisamat, Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada, unto our entire Rupanuga Guru Varga, and unto the many Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis who so kindly have bestowed their blessing upon me to allow me to do any kind of seva. So I just returned from, by the mercy of Guru Gauranga, the service of Hari Katha in some different places, and I want to extend my heartfelt thanks, especially to those devotees who, in many cases painstakingly arranged for the programs, the cooking, the organizing, and so many different things. And I'm always very touched by how devotees, though I'm not a very significant devotee in terms of stature and so many things, I don't want to go down that pike. But anyway, how they're always so kind to me, especially those devotees who are my senior in many cases, but they've always treated me with such affection and allow me to do service to Hari Katha, which is for my own edification, but as a service or an attempt to do a service, I try to constantly share. This is Vaishnav Maitri, Guyate, what is this? Tadati Pratagrinati, Guyamakyati Prichati, to reveal and inquire about confidential, heartfelt realizations in our unfoldment in Bhakti is part of Vaishnav Maitri, means Vaishnav friendship. And so I'm always very happy and feel very blessed anytime devotees will accommodate any scenario where that can take place. I obviously, in the course of travel, could not keep up necessarily at the same time with many questions and answers. So I'm trying to just cover a few of short topics that came up here, especially those that were requested to be done on this forum. I did try to answer back to some devotees directly who messaged questions and some who emailed questions, but I've asked in the past that it's better to put the questions in Messenger because, checking the emails and everything sometimes is a little bit difficult, especially when I'm traveling and everything. So, I think I'm perspiring, so tilak is everywhere because I'm simultaneously doing some other services. But anyway, so I did try to answer some people back directly, and this is just a very short video to answer some questions that had come up, which may be covered in a short answer. So one question was regarding institutions and Guru Tattva. So I'm just giving the broad category. The devotee wrote many sort of subcategories and made inquiries into various things regarding Guru Tattva, Guru-disciple relationship, and institutions. So he asked about my feeling on it, and so I don't like to do anything according to my feeling, so I will express what I've heard from Guru, Sadhu, and Sastra, and hopefully that will be something that will be helpful in your personal digestion on the topic. So, Srila Jiva Goswami Pad is written in Bhakti Sundarbha. Our Srila Prabhupada has quoted it in the Adi Leela chapter 30, chapter 1, text 35. So there he quoted from Bhakti Sandarbha by Jiva Goswami that one should not accept initiation based on hereditary, customary, social or ecclesiastical considerations. So one should try to accept initiation, how Srila Prabhupada quoted, based on a genuine posture of what is described in Shastra as Guru-disciple relationship. One should do pariksha, means examination of the Guru, preferably for 1 year. If you're hearing the Harikatha of that person for quite some time, and the Guru has a chance to examine your quality and behavior, Hari Bhakti Vilasa said this is the basis for a relationship to evolve, in which the person can then follow Rupa Goswami's instruction to do Guru Padasraya, excuse me, and enter into the shelter of Guru Parampara. So the idea of initiation being based on any other considerations, especially those 4 things that I mentioned, either customs, hereditary considerations, social convention, or even ecclesiastical arrangements, Jiva Goswami has said this is not the way to take initiation. So, Prabhuji, you and your good wife, you have to then take that and, put it make it a template, and then see how much the idea of those persons you're preaching to who want to enter parampara, how much those things are a factor versus how much there's the genuine cultivation of a relationship based on the inspiration of Shraddha. Ado Shraddha, in the very beginning there will be Shraddha. This is in 2 different phases. First, a person has any kind of bhakti unmukhi sukriti, means pious activities related to bhakti from a previous life, and that has somehow or another put them in contact with the influence of a sadhu. Example is that somebody may have heard a Harinam party, got a transcendental book from somebody doing book distribution, had the chance to take prasadam at one of the restaurants, or by having prasadam handed to them on the street or anything. But in some way, form, or fashion, they have some bhakti unmukhi sukritis, which gives rise to mati. Mati means a kind of vivek or discrimination. What else is there besides this material world? And it culminates in the question that Sanatana Goswami Pad asked, Ke ami kenyamai jari tapatrai. So when this comes, then it leads to a desire to search out the means to answer those questions. At that point, it leads to the lotus feet of a sadhu. Therefore, from Shraddha, it comes to sadhu sangha, in which a person now tries to answer those queries by approaching a sadhu. At the same time, when they approach a sadhu, faith is increased because it is now reposed in the sadhu. And having been reposed in the sadhu, that faith now, its potency to actually change the functions of the chitta. Shraddha anupayani varajam bhakti unmukha chitti vritti vishesh. It has the power then to turn the nature of how our consciousness functions and turns it towards service towards Sriman Mahaprabhu and Shri Radha Krishna Yugal. Right? So that is the influence of a sadhu and the actual association of a sadhu. These 2 things I've explained as Shraddha. So this is the beginning, and when this faith in a sadhu evolves, especially from hearing their Harikatha, Satam prasangam mama virya samvido bhavantirit karana rasanayakatha. When you hear the Harikatha of a sadhu, then the mama virya means the potency of Swarup Shakti, which is present in their samvad, means their Harikatha, and their own practice and behavior accompanying that gives rise to high class of spiritual exchange. It's called prasanga. So in that, then the heart can start to become purified, and the potency of influence of Swarup Shakti can then start to subsidize our sensual activities. Sensual activities here means our engagement in bhakti, not sense gratification. So don't misinterpret this. So it means because the material senses cannot serve Krishna. Atahashi Krishna namadi bhavad grayam indriyai. So grayam indriya means your material senses, they have no access to serving Krishna. Material eyes cannot see Krishna, material hands cannot do any service for Krishna, None of our material senses can do service. So it requires being subsidized by the spiritual energy. And that's what happens in the exchange between sadhu and aspirant, or eventually guru and sishya, or guru and disciple. That the subsidy in their sensual activities, the nature of their senses serving Krishna, is subsidized by spiritual potency. And this allows the unfoldment of Swarup Shakti gradually in increments through, obviously, sadhu sangha, and then bhajana kriya, receiving instructions and acting on those instructions, and then the potency of that bhajan, which is Swarup Shakti, removing anarthas, unwanted things, leading to steadiness of consciousness, then a taste in bhakti, and especially in bhakti rasa, and then also coming to the stage of asakti, and then bhav. You understand? So bhav is the goal of practicing sadhana. Kriti sajja, bhavet sajja, bhavasa saranavida. Nityasirisa bhavasha prakritam riddhi sajjata. This is the goal of our practice. So, to our original point, if the nature of the relationship between guru and sishya, or sadhu and aspirant, before people take initiation, is not nourished by these sastric factors, but is done under the four things that I mentioned earlier, social, hereditary, customary, or ecclesiastical considerations, then there could be some doubt as to the efficacy of the relationship. So I will ask that you digest those few points regarding Sastra and Sadhu and what our Guru Vargas have spoken on this. And then also, some things are also just practical. You have to see that the persons that you're cultivating, because your question was around persons that you're cultivating and where to send them and so forth. So it also may be that in hearing Harikatha, that they will naturally have gravitation towards wanting to have the association of someone in the mode of a relationship of guidance. So you can foster that, and by your fostering that, then you become a aid in the process of their unfoldment. Of course, if you feel deeply and genuinely that your own adhikar is in that position, then because you're the first influence of faith for them, if you genuinely feel, and it should be genuine, and you should have it confirmed by some senior persons, then you can take that responsibility. If not, then that person whom they're hearing their Harikatha, and they're having resonance with that Harikatha, and their shraddhas growing from that Harikatha, you can do Vatmar Padaksha Guru, means you can guide them on the path into the association of that person. Understand? Then that person will also have to decide, is this a suitable relationship for the two of us? Some of it may be based on, like I said, mutual examination. Some of it may be based in pragmatics and logistics. Like, it may not be pragmatic to accept a, association or somebody who's doing the service of accepting disciples, not to accept disciples in a place they can never have access, or in a place where, the entirety of their communication is always virtual. Because there is some need to have direct association in some cases at some times. So, or to have so many disciples that you don't have the ability to have individual relationships. I mentioned before that there are exceptions to this rule. Those who are sane patibhaktas, like you saw in our Srila Prabhupada, in my Guru Padma, and in many other stalwart devotees, Srila Bhaktisarana Saraswati Thakur, others, where they are in the category called sane pati, means like a general in the army of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. These are exceptional cases where they can digest having thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of disciples and make each disciple among those thousands of disciples feel an individual relationship. So those are some of the other considerations that are there. So hopefully, Prabhuji, this was helpful. And there should also be prudence. So prudence means that we should not be in a rush, but we should also not think that it is insignificant to create relationship between guru and disciple, or sadhu and aspirant. because it's not all about guru and disciple. In the beginning, it's about the sadhu and the aspirant. Sadhu means that person who can offer significant guidance in the goals of bhakti. So for instance, Jiva Goswami Pad is clearly mentioned what is a sadhu. Sadnoti sadayati cha Krishna prem itti sadhu. Because in general parlance, sadhu is a widely used word, especially in India, right? So sadhus may be mayavadis, yogis, so many different things. So Jiva Goswami specified sadhu in relation to bhakti means who has understood that the ultimate goal of life is Krishna prem, right? That person is called sadhu in relation to those aspiring for bhakti. Understand? So in the beginning, there will be more of a sadhu-aspirant relationship. Means there's a person who's considered, who has sadhutva. In Sanskrit, sadhutva means they have the qualities of a sadhu, especially in relation to bhakti, as I just described by Jiva Goswami. Then there are people aspiring in bhakti. So the first genesis of any kind of relationship is aspirant and a sadhu. And in many cases, Prabhuji, you're actually the sadhu in this case, right? Because if you yourself are practicing and you are giving Harikatha, nourishing people, you're acting like that. Again, if you have any doubt about the nature of doing the service beyond that and you want to guide people, then it is like Vatma Padaksha Guru, but you're being sadhu for that person in that sense, right? Especially if you are very strict to the teachings of our Guru Varga and what is written in Sastra. Because these things are important. Guru, Sadhu, and Sastra are immovable vetting processes in bhakti. You cannot really, there's no such thing as conjectured ideas. Well, I think, right? And many times I travel for doing Harikatha, and I avoid like the plague, even if there's something that I've read or something, but I have not vetted that thing. I'm giving one example. Many, many years ago, I know I heard a lecture of my Gurudev speak about the beauty of the combination of the, what's called Varnavastu. Varnavastu, Prem Varnavastu, means the color of Radhika is golden color. That is the Prem Varnavastu. Varnavastu means the substance of her love is itself the color of her form. In our case, whatever colors and everything and bodies we have are acquired by karma, and they're temporal, and they don't relate to the soul. But in the spiritual world, the body of someone is a composition of the bhav they have itself. So the Prem Varnavastu of Radhika is gold, and the Varnavastu of Sri Krishna is sham, like a rain cloud, this dark blue rain cloud. When you put the two colors together, obviously, in the color spectrum, it creates the color of green. And my Guru Padma told, for this reason, Sri Vrindavan Dham is green color, because it is mirroring the beauty of the praying between Radha and Krishna and reflecting it everywhere in Braj. So it made sense logically and everything, but at the time, this is maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, I was traveling for Harikatha. I could not remember date or time or anything. I know I remember hearing it, but I couldn't confirm it clearly. That was it in Braj? Was it here? This, that. So I was very shy to speak that thing in any public forum. It sounds very nice. It's very inspirational, but I had some fear to speak it because I had not yet been able to remember clearly where I heard it, right? So, and my point here is that we want to have everything vetted. We don't want to speak anything that's conjecture. My senior sort of god uncle, Nestai Baba Prabhu, he's passed on from this world, but he's always very kind to me, Stai Baba Prabhu. We were once at the house of one other devotee friend, and he had just come back from India, from Parikram, being in Vrindavan, and he repeated this, that I just heard Gurudev tell us amazing thing. So from that day on, I felt very comfortable to speak it. But then on top of that, I was studying the commentaries one day, and I ran across the verse, right? And I actually copied the verse somewhere. I can't find it in my notes, but I copied the verse and everything. But point being, now I feel complete comfort in repeating it in the course of Harikatha, because there's been vetting by Guru, Sadhu, and Sastra. So this is our standard template that we apply to everything in terms of a vetting process. So again, I mentioned in Bhakti Sandarbha, you can, of course, see in Srila Prabhupada's, again, I quoted Adi Leela, chapter 1, I think it's text 35. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada quotes Jiva Goswami's statements in Bhakti Sandarbha regarding those 4 things about taking initiation. All right, Prabhuji, so hopefully that was helpful. If not, you can write back. I'll try to answer. Another question I think that maybe all I have time for is about various considerations regarding ingenuity in preaching versus ingenuity in practice. So I thought that the devotee who wrote that question couched it very, very well, because he mentioned ingenuity in preaching and ingenuity in practice. So actually, Prabhu, what you wrote was really very sound and logical. If you're looking for confirmation, that's what I'm doing for what it's worth. If you have any trust that I can confirm, but what you wrote was correct. That ingenuity, and let me explain what he wrote, that ingenuity in preaching is one thing that's acceptable, and we see that in the model of our Guru Vargas, including Sachinandan Shri Gaura Hari himself doing his Leela. What we don't find so much at all, really, is ingenuity of practice. In other words, the practices of bhakti written and given in Guru Parampara, they are staples of tried and true methodology for advancing in bhakti. And we don't see deviation from those practices. We see varieties of the same principle of practice in different places, but we never see a ingenuity in terms of something new regarding the practice. Give me 1 second, I have to tend to something. I'll return. I am multitasking as usual, trying to cook the lunch preparations for Thakurji as well. So there cannot be ingenuity of practice. And what that means is, according to our Guru Parampara, we've received a certain standard of practice and a certain way to do that practice. That practice is the tried and true method experienced previously by our Guru Paramparas, who have all become successful, those who were doing sadhana, and those who are Nitya Siddha, who've descended to perform the Leela of teaching that methodology, obviously also are revealing it because it is the method by which perfection is obtained. So, Guru Parasraya, etc., following the Angas of Bhakti, 5 main Angas of Bhakti. So, all of these things are tried and true. And there is no real place or real scope for creating something different from that. The idea is that the currency that any jiva has is their faith. That is your currency in bhakti. So you take your faith currency and you're investing it in both someone and something that will develop that faith through the incremental stages to the goal of practice, which is bhav. I've already explained that and quoted the verse. Right? So that methodology is something that's passed down. It's not something that's garnered from there's Avarohan and Arohan Pantha. Means going up or ascending process and the descending process. So everything about the practice of bhakti is in the descending process. It has come down in parampara. Oh, this is how you practice. Oh, this is the methodology used for obtaining the next stage of advancement in this or that. You understand? So there's no scope or room really for ingenuity in that practice. Now, what did I mean by the details of the practice may vary? If you will go in one mat, they will sing maybe 1 bhajan or 2 bhajans different from what's sung in another mat. But the principle of doing bhajan and singing the bhajans of the previous acharyas to stimulate and invoke the mood of what it is we're practicing, that does not change. Similarly, you may find that in one mat, they may have a system of doing Srimad Bhagavatam in the series of charits. Charits means like a whole pastime at a time. Like they will do Dhruva Charit, or Prahlad Narasingha Charit, or Ajamil Upakyan, means the teachings regarding Ajamil. In this way, it's contextually easier to grasp a particular section of Bhagavatam sometimes than it is going verse by verse, because when you go verse by verse, you're looking at 18,000 verses for one, and for two, the connectivity in many cases sometimes can become a little awry, because it's difficult to keep up with, what happened before, what's this leading to, well, the history of this, and so in many cases, sometimes it can become difficult. One thing that has helped in our ISKCON society is that Srila Prabhupada's written purports. So he's kind of given a connectivity guide, verse to verse. But even then, sometimes Srila Prabhupada, in his Bhav Anubhav, which is a purport, the one Sanskrit name for a purport is Bhav Anubhav, which means Srila Prabhupada's mood that follows the dictation of the mood given in the verse. Now, it may be at that time, Srila Prabhupada noticing something in the social fabric that he wanted to make a comment on, he will put that in the purport. That's a Bhav Anubhav. That's a particular mood being expressed by the Guru at that time about a particular topic. Because maybe something was read in the paper, something was seen in the social fabric that Srila Prabhupada felt needed to be commented on as either help for devotees, or as a warning to devotees, or as a prediction about things that will happen, or something like that. So we have to be able to distinguish those things from things Srila Prabhupada is speaking about in complete connectivity. It's called abhyas, literally in Sanskrit. That's the abhyas of Srimad Bhagavatam. Generally, when you analyze any scripture, there are 6 elements. 3 elements are very prominent. Upakrama means what is the opening statement of the book and its intention. Upasanghara means what is the concluding statement of that writing. And abhyas means what is the connective tissue between the opening and the closing. And there's 3 other things like upapati, apurvata, arthabhat, etc. But those first 3 things are primary. So we need to be able to do that. We need to be able to find the connective tissue of the beginning to the end of Srimad Bhagavatam. You understand? So sometimes it becomes very, very difficult to do that by doing it verse by verse. So sometimes, some mats may say we'll do one whole charit at a time and focus on that. And in this way, it's more easy to grasp the context. But those minor differences are in the same line of principle as Bhagavat Sravan. In the 5 categories, Nama Sankirtan, Sadhu Sangha, Bhagavat Shravan, Maturavas, Shri Murtaya, Shraddhaya Sevan. These are the 5 main angas of bhakti, right? So it's in line with hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavat Shravan. You understand? So, but it may vary from one mat to another. But the principle of hearing Bhagavatam will not change. So you will not find any of our acharyas give credence to the idea of ingenuity in changing the very base model of practice. Give me 1 second again, please. I beg your forgiveness. Alrighty, I've never had to do that twice in a row while attending the things. I'm not claiming expertise in cooking, just trying. So, anyways, but in serving takuji, you have to be very attentive, so I'm begging devotees' forgiveness. All right, so in this way, you cannot find anywhere written in Sastra that there should be ingenuity of practice. Now, you may find even in different pariwars. Pariwar means there are different lines which have come from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Those who reside in Braj especially, or Navadvip or Jagannath Puri, and they are in one of the traditional pariwars. Traditional pariwars means like Advaita Pariwar, Gadadhar Pariwar, right? And coming in that line, there are certain practices that have been passed down in those lines. They are genuine practices, but they may differ somewhat from the practices which were put together, garnered from Sadhu and Sastra by Al Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and the practices of Gaudiya Math, which, all the various institutions which have been spawned from Gaudiya Math as well, like our ISKCON Society, other Maths, etc. Right? So you will see some variation of practice in the traditional pariwars. But still, those were not also based on ingenuity. If you will go back to the writing of Dhyana Chandra Goswami, the disciple of Gopal Guru Goswami, who's a disciple of Akeshwar Pandit, he wrote one book, Gaura Govind Archan Smaran Padati. Those practices were passed down. And he's simply documenting a methodology for how to execute those practices. In the same way, Al Srila Prabhupada, for instance, has given us from the nature of the practices given by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, how to do Mangalarati, Guru Ashtakam is done first, and then the curtains open in Vrindavan. At least this is how it goes. But the mood is that first there should be Guru, Stav, and Stuti, and meditation on Guru. Then meditation on Mahaprabhu, then meditation on Radha Krishna. So you kind of see that if you examine closely the nature of the practice that was given to us by Al Srila Prabhupada. Right? In fact, during the course of my travels now, I spoke on that somewhat. That in the very beginning of everyone's morning, the first thing you do before you even put your foot on the ground in the morning, which should be right foot first, is to offer pranams to Sri Guru, beginning with Nama Om. And Nama Om means Na Aham Ameti. It means an acknowledgement of Saranagati. Not I and mine, Gurudev, but I am your surrendered soul, and I am for your service. So that's the very first thing, is to reaffirm Saranagati each day. Because without Saranagati, you cannot practice the limbs of Bhakti. In Prahalad Narasingha Charit, when Prahalad Maharaj was talking to his father Hiranyakasipu, he mentioned Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Parasevanam Achanam Vandanam Dasya Sakyam Atmanivedanam. So those are the 9 angas of Bhakti. But then he quotes something very important. Iti Pumsa Prita Vishnu Bhaktas Chinnava Lakshana. Unless you will do Pums Arpita, means unless you will surrender yourself, you cannot practice these 9 angas of Bhakti. So the 6 things of Saranagati, Anukulyasya Sankalpa, Pratikulyasya Vivarjanam, to accept what's favorable, reject what's unfavorable. Rakshishiti Vishwasho, to have Vishwas means firm faith. Krishna is my protector. Goprave Varanam Tata, and maintainer. Atmanakshepa Karapanya, always be very humble and meek. Right? And then offer your very self to Krishna. This is called Sad Anga Saranagati, 6 angas of Saranagati, or surrender. Doing those, then you can practice the 9 angas of Bhakti. Understand? So we always affirm that every morning, even before getting out of bed. And then we do morning Sadachar. You will beg Bhumi Devi, oh Bhumi Devi, I have to place my feet on you, please forgive me. Because Bhumi Devi is Krishna Shakti. It's amazing because we have a whole, in the sort of secular community, there's a whole thing about Mother Earth, Earth Day, etc. But in many of these cases, it's a kind of Sukriti in many ways, because Bhu Devi is a Shakti of Bhagavan. Especially if you go to any temple in South India, you'll see 3 deities that always accompany the deity of Narayan. Sri, Bhu, and Leela or Leela Shakti. So Mother Earth is actually a Shakti of God. So before placing your feet on the earth, you should, in English, if you don't know the prayer, Samudra Mekale Devi, Parvatstana Mandale, if you're not knowing the prayers and everything, you can chant Hare Krishna and begging in your heart forgiveness that I have to place my feet on you. Understand? And then carrying out the rest of your sadachar, and then going to Gurudev, touching his lotus feet when if you're the person who's waking the deities and everything. And then in your heart, with the meditation, which I described recently in New Vrindavan. Yeah, twice, once in New Vrindavan and once just outside of New Vrindavan at one devotee's home. I described the Guru Ashtakam. I've described it many times before, but it's very important because this is our first major meditation in the morning, that meditation on Guru. In that meditation on Guru, everything is there. All the different stages of bhakti, from Shraddha to Bhav. In the first 6 verses of Guru Ashtakam, all of those things are there. So the way that you are able to understand that, if you want to, you can research by looking at the book called Madhurya Kandamini of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who is also the author of that very prayer, Guru Ashtakam. So in Kavya, or in poetry, he has placed the understanding of Madhurya Kandambini in those 8 verses. So you just have to look very closely at both the writing and the prayer, and you'll be able to see this synthesis. If you'll do meditation, if you'll do the dhyan, deep meditation on this, then the Falstuti of that Guru Astakam, Srimad Guru Astakame Taruchai, Brahma Muhurte Prarati Prayatna, Yat Seva Vrindavan Natta Suksha, Sevaya Labja Jansuantaiva. That prayer is guaranteeing. In other words, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur was giving his blessing and guaranteeing you will obtain direct service in Braj if you will recite this prayer with deep understanding. So here, what our Srila Prabhupada has given us is the methodology by which we'll obtain perfection. There is no ingenuity in that. Beginning, as I mentioned with the things earlier, and then reciting this Guru Astakam. And then, of course, in our particular mat, my Guru Parapadma has also given the Mangalarti song that was written by his Guru Dev. Mangala Shri Guru Gauda, Mangala Murati, Mangala Shri Radha Krishna, Jugala Pareti. So, we recite that. And this is a insight into the nature of the mood of the Mangalarti, especially during that time of day. Because the next line says, Mangala Nisanta Lila. So doing this Nisanta Lila, what mood is there? What pastimes are there? You understand? All of this should be done as dhyan, means of meditation, not just niyamagraha Rupa Goswami warned against, which means ritualistically performing these things. So they should be done with meditation. This is the meditation. You don't have to have a separate kind of meditation. The process itself is a meditation. And then after that, of course, we beg to Tulsi Devi to reaffirm the blessings to have service in Vrindavan, etc. So in this way, gradually, as maturation comes, devotee begins to realize both through Harikatha, chanting of Harinam, and following the Sadachar and Vaishnava practices given without any additions, ingenuity, speculations, etc., how the process perfectly is suited to give us our perfection. So, in regard to the genesis of your question, yes, there can be ingenuity in preaching. How will we reach out to people to create a bridge for them to come to Krishna consciousness? Many different people who are executing preaching services find various ways to accomplish that. One of the things that, of course, we have to be careful of is until we obtain our own perfection, the tendencies of our own previous sanskars karmically will arise. So if you start doing something like, I want to do service by playing music, well, in one sense, there may be no harm, but, you know, having been a musician myself, right? If you find yourself being caught up or getting attached to the enjoyment of playing music, and then you're trying to kind of dovetail that with bringing people to Krishna consciousness, it is called aropsita bhakti. Means it's something that's not pure practice of bhakti. You're assigning a quality of bhakti to it, right? Because you have that desire. So we'll have to be careful of these kind of things because it slows the progress in bhakti. At the same time, if genuinely that's where you are and you're doing that as a service, then it's dovetailing, it will gradually help. But also it will elongate your process because you're maintaining attachment to enjoyment in that thing in the name of doing bhakti. So you want to be a little bit careful about that, right? But other than that, different devotees, according to their understanding, are able to reach out in different ways. I had the great fortune to serve under His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami. And I really believe he was one of the first people with great ingenuity in this regard, how to reach out. Many devotees have been doing, I'm not saying that. I'm speaking from a personal experience, obviously. That he had great ingenuity in reaching out in different ways to bridge people into bhakti. You understand? Then it becomes up to those devotees, having walked across that bridge, to start to then develop further in bhakti. But if you look back at many of the programs, they were very instrumental in finding a common ground to meet people and bring them to bhakti. And I've seen many other devotees, who are also now doing similar things. And I feel that they're very wonderful, but again, that warning is there that the mode of goodness, and most of these things are in the mode of goodness, has the qualities of entrapping one in a false sense of knowledge and in tasting happiness in the mode of goodness. So the happiness that we want to experience should be a byproduct of happiness that Krishna is experiencing from our Savior. There should really be no self-interest. Anya abhilasita sunya. To be void of any other desire except Krishna's happiness is not an easy thing. So it requires deep investment of faith and practice. So we want to be careful in our ingenuity for preaching, which is pleasing to Mahaprabhu and our Guru Vargas, that we ourselves don't become trapped in the enjoyment of whatever modality we're using to do that. But we try to move closer to Anya Abhilasita Sunya. Understand? And again, just reiterating, in the terms of the practice, there's not much ingenuity that can be done, right? And in fact, many cases where ideas about ingenuity came in, things go kind of awry, right? I know, obviously 40, 50 years ago when devotees were first coming, there was ideas that perhaps devotees could enhance their realizations by some kind of intoxication. So obviously now completely everybody would say, oh, that's ridiculous. But at the time, people thought perhaps this is, something that can be an enhancement to inner moods or something, which is completely ridiculous, never been written anywhere by any of our acharyas or anything. But I'm just giving that example to show that if you try to place ingenuity in the parampara given systems of practice of bhakti, it does not work. All right, my Dandavat Pranam devotees, hopefully this was helpful. I will promise to try to catch up to the other questions. For those who have written questions in emails, I'm going to have to, and forgive me, this is one of my lackings, I'm going to have to search through the emails to find them somehow or another. And I guess other people face this too. It's just you get an overwhelming amount of emails, not just in a spiritual capacity, but from all kinds of, if you buy one thing, you'll get 10 emails from different companies. So it's ridiculous. But it's better to put them in Messenger if you have Facebook, or even you can text me, but you just inbox me for the number, right? So I don't become overwhelmed in that way also. All right, my Dandavat Pranam, I also pray for the blessings of all devotees to continue to do service to our Guru Parampara and to Hari Katha. Jai Dandavat Pranam, Vancha Kalpatarubhisha, Kripa Shindavevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Shri Radha Vallabh Ji Ki Jai, Jai Radhe Radhe.